What you guys are doing here today and what's being explored is very important to me. Today we have our panelists here, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be asking some questions. I'm going to have 4 questions that I would like for each panelist to address. Panelists, please take just a few minutes, maybe 2, 3, or 4 minutes to answer each question, and we'll go down the line if that's okay with you guys.
Yes.
All right. It's unanimous. All right, we're moving forward. Question number 1. We'll start with Dr. Frye. How important do you feel the inflammatory diet and pain connection is?
It's extremely important because many times people end up trying to just chasing the inflammation to get rid of their pain, and they're unsuccessful because if you artificially do that, it just keeps coming back again. What we know about pain specifically, and then joint pain, is that it's an extension of what's actually happening inside your gut, inside your body. And if you have inflammation internally, then it is going to then end up externally to joints and other parts. And so the solution isn't to try to just uninflame a joint, but to really get your whole body uninflamed. And food helps you do that.
Fantastic.
Yes, the inflammation and pain, very crucial element, because inflammation hinges on the nerves which causes the pain. But as far as food as medicine is concerned, there are definite food elements that are anti-inflammatory. So if a person properly eats enough of these anti-inflammatory foods, such as dark leafy greens or many berries, such as like blueberries, and a specific healthy oils, such as olive oil, if you incorporate those daily into your diet, you can ward off some of those inflammatory problems. I've actually done that with one aspect I had a couple of years ago. I had a hip that kept popping. I don't know, getting older, you move around and things start cracking and popping, and it's like, uh-oh. And I looked into it and saw, well, yeah, that could be an aspect of inflammation in that area. I'm not sure why it's being inflamed, but started eating like about a half a cup to a cup of blueberries every day. And strangely enough, I thought it would be a longer time involved into that. But really, in about 3 to 5 days, the popping actually alleviated. And by the time I did it for a couple of weeks, it was gone. I was like, well, I don't know what initiated the inflammation, but I definitely knew the food intake that I had changed to actually helped it to be relieved. So food is a good thing if you use it wisely.
What they said. Essentially, there is a correspondence between foods and inflammation. A lot of times when you look at the research of it, there is an emphasis on the therapeutic model. And the therapeutic model, which as a clinical researcher I have nothing against. That's how I make my money. But the emphasis on it is sometimes overvalued. When we take a look at eating healthy and obtaining the proper necessities to reduce inflammation or anything of that nature, I think it's properly done so if we have access to food. What's actually very interesting is I work with a very destitute groups of populations within Detroit, Lincoln Park, a lot of downriver, and a lot of these individuals do suffer from certain conditions that we just noted. But it's essential to note that they don't have access to food. Although we are a first world nation, there are parts of our state that are third world that then resort to therapeutic sensations in regards to pharmaceutical intervention to control certain pain. Once again, as stated, blueberry, leafy greens, these things are essential to reducing pain. There's actually research being done on it. Certain individuals don't want to release that research for obvious monetary reasons, but providing individuals with the access to garner food to reduce inflammation or to reduce any type of congenital disorders, I think should be valued as well.
And I think it's important also to just add to the end of that is that we talk about foods that can make you uninflamed, but also there's foods that contribute to the inflammation, like you're talking about, that it's just as wise to make sure you're not adding foods that make you feel worse. And many times you notice that kind of stuff because maybe you eat something that you shouldn't have the night before. Maybe you had some alcohol, or you maybe had some ice cream, and you wake up the next morning and everything hurts. That's that connection to inflammation. And if it happens that easily and quickly to you, it's a bigger issue than just a few joint pain pains. Wouldn't you guys agree? Because inflammation is a bigger conversation than just causing pain or connecting to pain, but all sickness and disease is driven out of inflammation too.
Can I follow that up?
Oh, yeah.
There's another interesting part about this when we're speaking of inflammation, depending on the specific individual and specific cause of that inflammation. We must note that, say this individual does not have access to the proper nutrition to reduce his inflammation, because of food insecurity, this can be debilitating to the mind. This can cause depression on 2 levels. 1, I'm going through my chronic pain. Secondarily, I do not have the finances, nor the accessibility, or the utilizations to obtain these food. So essentially, an individual who has one issue now plausibly has 2 specific situations that need to be addressed.
Good question.
She'll be the first person I ask the next question. Okay, question number 2. How should food be minimally processed in order to get the most from the food we eat?
Well, food is only processed to the extent it is now for monetary reasons. Food is processed to the point of adding sugars and salts and stabilizers and artificial flavors in order to use the quantity of food produced at a lesser quality value so that it is palatable by the masses. It is not food that we should be ingesting for our well-being. So it should be not processed at all, if possible, but to the extent of how our society and civilization is built in this country, it is so. And the best thing that we can do for ourselves is choose foods when we are shopping that have, as most of us have heard, the least amount or least number of ingredients as possible, and get away from the higher sodiums, the higher sugars. That is the only way we can do this right now until there are more platforms for people and groups and organizations to fight for what should be truly our food sources to keep us well. Because our society is plagued with so many diseases, illnesses, and disorders that come from poor eating.
And I think it's excellent, those are all excellent points, and we should take a look at other nations. Some nations who do not have processed foods, let's take a look at their lifespans. If it wasn't necessarily for some sort of climate change type of deal or some sort of ordeal in regards to engagement militaristically, numerous nations have diets that are with unprocessed foods. And take a look at their health, take a look at their status, take a look at their longevity. It's something that we can learn from. It's going to be difficult to wholeheartedly move away from a processed model. I don't want to say impossible, because my mother told me nothing's impossible, but she's not here. It's almost impossible. But we need to find a way to do so, because I'm a victim of what I eat.
I just want to add on that, I grew up in a very Italian cultural background, childhood. My parents came from Italy, and again, from other nations. My parents grew up in wartime Italy when things were dismal. They didn't have access to monetary aspect to gain food. They were hungry many times, but in that, what they ate was wholesome, nutritive, and they were not unhealthy. They were hungry at times, but they were well in nature. So that's where the disparity comes between us being, a strong nation, advanced, but yet our population struggling with health issues.
Yeah, quite frankly, we probably have access to more food than we need to be taking in, and we've, as a nation, gotten too used to eating a lot of food. But in talking about minimally processing foods, there's a couple of things, since we have all three of us probably agree on all this topic, is another perspective of that question is how you're processing even your food at home. You're buying fresh fruits and vegetables, and then how you're cooking them. And so there's certain ways that you would, first of all, I can say out loud, completely avoid a microwave for the rest of your life, if anybody's doing that. They've seen, and we know that you're taking nutrient-dense food and putting it in a microwave and turning it into toxins instead of nutrients. And then nutrients are things the way God designed food to be grown in a plant, and then you absorbing it out of the plant can't be replaced by the processed food industry where there's food that's been added preservatives to it and food that's been denatured in order to live on a shelf for a longer period of time. Same thing's true about oil. I mean, you have to use oil that's minimally processed, that you're not having heated up oil, that then the oil is damaged, then you have absolutely no value, no nutritional value in that oil anymore. Where you use a cold pressed olive oil, you're getting a lot of nutritional value out of that. So it reduces the benefit of what you're getting out of that food if you damage it, and using even olive oil to cook your food, if you use a high temperature with it, you're damaging your olive oil. So I just tell people olive oil should be used cold or at low, like sautés, and then coconut oil is something that we use for high heat temperatures, or a raw grass-fed butter can be used at high temperatures. And then you should have a variety of ways that you eat your foods, that some should be raw and some should be cooked, so that you're getting a combination of things your body to digest.
Oh, your mic died? I'd like to share mine.
Thank you. That's a great point. I just want to reiterate that about the cooking with oils. Coconut oil, as we understand, is the only oil that can be raised to the temperature where things are actually smoking or sizzling in the pan. Otherwise, like Dr. Frye said, you want to use other oils can be used, like extra virgin olive oil at low simmering heat. Real important. Next question. In what ways can community educators, such as yourselves, convey the concept food as medicine to communities so that it gains familiarity and practice in daily lives?
Can you repeat the beginning, first part of the question?
No. Sorry. What ways can community educators convey food as medicine to communities so it gains familiarity and practice?
There's a certain methodology that we can use to convey our message, but I think the onus is not on the people we are serving, the onus is on us. Oftentimes, I live in a bubble and I'm comfortable in my bubble because I know the people in my bubble, and the people in my bubble I think like me. But our relationship should extend beyond our borders. Traveling to numerous colleges or faith-based institutions or community centers or assisted living centers, you engage with populations that you may not engage with prior to. Understanding individuals' cultures, understanding their needs and wants specifically, and the foods they eat, you can learn from one another. But us as educators, I think it's essential to provide concrete evidence, scientifically as well, that these healthy initiatives can be promoted in our community. I'm not going to name the hospital, and I'm not going to name the city, I'm not going to name the institution, nor am I going to name the individuals. So essentially my next statement may be pointless, but there's an entity that went into a community and stated, we're going to teach you how to be healthy. So they went into this community and they attempted to educate. And unfortunately, the community, how you guys are looking at me like you're confused right now, they were looking at the presenters as if they were confused because in their culture, it is high in omega-3 fatty acids. There's a lot of greens that they eat. Most of their food is naturally grown. So I think understanding the cultural dynamic of each specific population that we focus on, as educators, we need to educate ourselves on their positives and negatives before we go enter any type of collaborative mechanism with them.
Very, very much so, because people, as much you can tell with people you know in your family, whatever might happen, that you know the best advice to give somebody to change something in their lives to make it better, usually is confronted with resistance. True is the same for someone trying to introduce a different food base for your diet that you're totally unfamiliar with. Why would somebody want to eat something that they are not familiar with, they've never tasted before, and have no idea how to cook it? Who would do that? Who would waste their money in buying something to do that? Like have it sit there in the fridge, it's like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't even know if they like it. Why did I buy it? So going to the markets even, I'm stopped many times when I'm picking produce by people walking by other customers. What is that? How do you use it? And these are older people. It's like, how can you have never seen this? How can you have never tasted this? So as far as a community aspect, that is the resistance or apprehension that most people have. So to introduce healthy food into their lives, and not just healthy food, but like Dr. Frye said, you can get healthy food and then take it home and cook it in an unhealthy manner. So there was like no point to buying the healthy food to begin with, because you're creating an unhealthy situation for yourself anyway. So the thing is to educate people, whether it be a community program. Actually, I just came from a presentation that's farm to school, bringing children into like farm situations or farmers into school situations, having them become familiar with the fruits and vegetables hands-on. They can see for themselves, taste for themselves. Because until they do that, see, taste, learn how to cook the foods healthfully so they can incorporate them, integrate them into their lives that they're used to, that change isn't going to come about. People are much more easily taken to the idea, if something's ailing me, I'll take a pill, because that's much more easier to do that than to have to do a whole dietary change. And people do not like change. So in order to develop this, promote it, advance it, to help our communities be more healthful as our neighbors, as our friends, our family, that has to be taken as a step-by-step learning experience by them, so they can understand that by doing this, they will feel better, their families will be better, their children, grandchildren will benefit from this, because it'll be a healthful lifestyle that's carried on through generations, because then it's something familiar and used to, and something that they will appreciate for themselves, knowing that their family members are healthier. They're maybe able to get rid of that diabetes that's been affecting the family for a couple of generations, or that heart disease that's been affecting the family. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, it's heart problems are in their family. Oh, diabetes that's in their family. But what are families used to? They're used to eating together. They're eating the same food base together. So is it the genetics, or is it because they're eating that dietary hereditary, like tradition or cultural background food that they're used to? So there's a difference between the genetics and what actually is happening in the family dynamics of generation to generation. And there needs to be a change somewhere along the line. People have to start doing that to change for themselves and for their family members and generations to come.
Well, this is such a big question, because you and I both know as chiropractors, change for people is hard when you introduce doing something different. So we live in the world of trying to teach people to step out of the medical model and look at a different way to even approach your health. And so there's really kind of two parts to that. The answer to that question is how do you get a community to change? And as you guys so eloquently pointed out, that it has to be something that's done gradually, and change is never just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process when it comes to learning to eat and change cultures and things like that. But one of the things I love to do is just really let people understand truth to the point where they get it, because change can also be fast. Somebody can make a decision that they want to stop smoking and try forever, and then watch their aunt suffocate and die of a lung cancer, and then all of a sudden they quit the next day, no problem, right? So change can be transformational. And so for me, I like to just keep stuff simple. And here's the simple truth. If you had a fish, and the fish's water was getting full of mildew, and it was cloudy, and of course, you feed the fish, and then the fish goes to the bathroom in the water it's living in, and pretty soon after a while, you don't change the water, you can't even see the fish in the tank anymore, right? So we all know if we leave that fish in there, what's going to happen to it?
Die.
It's going to die, right? And so is the solution to that problem to give the fish a pill? No. Right? You can't just give the fish a pill and then hope it gets better. You have to change the fish's environment, right? And we have to do the same thing to ourselves as a community, where people need to change the way they're eating because the environment inside their body is creating sickness and disease. And the only way to change the environment inside is to change what you're putting inside. And so if we make it that simple for people, and they get a light bulb. I know in 30 years of practice, you can't force anybody to change, but people are usually motivated. Unfortunately, some people wait until they're already in trouble before they're motivated. But a lot of times we can inspire people just by keeping it simple. And I think we, like you had said earlier, Severia, that changing culture younger, to start teaching people that that's how we take care of ourselves is also a big influence on how we would change the future for people.
I'm sorry.
Don't be.
Agreed 100%. We should not dictate. As food, we plant a seed and it grows, we should plant a seed in their minds and let that grow. One thing we also have to remember is along with food insecurities, there are financial insecurities as well. So I can't come into a community or I can't come into a facility and say, hey, go spend $400 on leafy green foods that are organic or whatever the situation may be. Yesterday, 2 days ago, there was a town hall meeting with, what is her name? Kimberly. She's what does she do? She's a prosecutor for Wayne County. She's a head prosecutor or lead prosecutor, whatever she called herself. Everybody's got a title nowadays. And an individual spoke up and stated that how can you, she was speaking in terms of her child and stated that my child was put on Ritalin or put on all these psychiatric medications, and he was called crazy, and he was called this, and he was called that. He got into a little bit of trouble, went to juvenile hall. When at home, I have issues paying my light bill. I have issues buying healthy food. I need help with this. I don't need my child medicated. So oftentimes there is a idealization of over-medication, but not take a look at, one, the food insecurities, two, the financial insecurities that cannot get them that healthy food. And I think that if we acknowledge that these things exist, the model that we use to inform the general public and inform ourselves, when we educate ourselves, the information we provide to specific populations will be much more clear, much possibly be more accepted.
Good answers. I want to ask you guys, how do you assess dietary problems and digestive malfunction, diseases that seem to be induced by toxic environment, toxic food? I want you guys to kind of tell us each about what you do in your practice and like where do you start with people?
Okay, so first of all, I would look at, of course, we always talk about looking at different symptoms, but not so much just their physical symptoms, but even how their body is. So many times you can see that somebody's malnutrition, that maybe is not absorbing food properly just by their body typing. They're maybe not really gaining any weight, or they can be the opposite of that, where they have gained a lot of weight. So assessing that initially. And if we find that a lot of people with allergies and a lot of food allergies end up having leaky gut problems. So I think really taking a very thorough history of what it's been like to be inside their body for however many decades that they've been on the planet, and finding out what kinds of symptoms that they have. So when we look at somebody that would have maybe a lot of allergies to certain things, sensitivities, we like to do testing. I like to test better than to guess. So one of the tests that we use in our office is an IgG test, which is a blood drop inflammatory test that you'll be able to tell if there's a food that, a lot of times this happens. I have patients that I would take off of sugar and flour. We put them on a grainless diet, and then they're still not changing. So assessing to see if there's something that they're eating that is causing inflammation that normally in somebody else's body wouldn't be causing inflammation. So I think it's important to test. We also use a urinary test that measures the Krebs cycle. And so for the Krebs cycle, kind of a brief explanation is what you bring in food into your body, how your body breaks that down and turns it into energy in every cell in your body. And it's a miraculous, beautiful orchestra of things that have to happen in the body in order for that to go on and do it properly. And so the urinalysis is done that will be able to read exactly what kind of vitamin you're lacking or what kind of nutrient you're lacking in that cycle that's not allowing it to operate properly. So we use both of those to be specifically testing for somebody. And then those give you a better description of nutritionally what somebody would be lacking. If they have vitamin deficiency, we have a tendency with vitamins and in food as medicine to say, oh, you have this symptom, take this or rub this on this. And we end up using food in such a way that, yes, we are kind of still treating the body with food. And in my practice, and the way that we look at the body, is the body doesn't really need help healing, it just needs no interference. And so we have to find out what's stopping that person's body from either absorbing food properly or digestion. And in a chiropractic world, sometimes that's even neurology that we have to test. Because we find out if you have nerve interference, it doesn't matter how many vitamins and healthy foods that you eat if your body's not absorbing things and then processing them properly. So even a neurological assessment is vital. And you stop and think about it, like Christopher Reeves had his spinal cord severed. There was no amount of food that would change his condition, right? So the nervous system is one of the most important things, so that all these other things can then work.
I'm not a medical background, so I don't do assessing of digestive problems, but I can say with having been a food entrepreneur and making food for others in that area, and just noting, like I do nutritional cooking classes and whatnot, and just notations of seeing the ebbs and flows of what people are eating and what happens to them, and not only what they're eating. What most people don't think about is how they're eating. Are they eating in a stressful situation? Are they eating in a situation where they have to eat fast? Are they eating in a situation where they're guzzling tons of water or other beverages in their eating process? That changes the digestive enzymes that inhabit the gut and allow for the digestive enzymes to do the work they need to do. Then if they don't do the work they need to do, then the people have the problems of, the gas, the bloating, then the distended stomach. So it's like a domino effect. So is it what I ate or is it how I'm eating? So concentrating way on how they're eating. So I have seen this multiple times with family members especially. And doing research, like if you look on the internet yourself and read such things, you need to eat in a balanced way so that I don't know how many of you have heard about food combining. Certain foods need acids to break them down. Other foods need alkaline to break them down. And if you're eating the two things combined, the acid and alkaline, they neutralize. So if you're eating certain things at a certain time, those foods don't get digested properly, or it takes an extended time for them to digest, and then it's fermenting in your gut, and that's when the acid, the heartburn, and how many people do you know who have heartburn or have acid reflux going to bed and they can't sleep? So it's a balance. Definitely you have to rule out true medical problems that might be going on, but a lot of times, sometimes we have to go back and assess ourselves. Make some checkpoints. It's like, what am I doing? I'm having this problem on a regular basis when I'm eating such and such. What am I doing when I'm eating such and such? Is it the food or is it how I'm eating the food? I had an issue years back. I would be eating, again with the Italian aspect, big meal, and the fruit would be the dessert aspect. So I'd be eating food, and this was when I was an adult. Didn't happen as a child, but as an adult, I ate the food, ate the fruit. I'd be getting a pain here, like a dull kind of pain, and like almost like a burn. It's like, that never happened, and I noticed it. Make a little diary for yourself when you're getting these odd sensations. Write a diary. I noticed that it would be a citrus fruit at the end of the meal. I came to find out that fruit, to be able to digest all its nutrients, you should eat on all its own, on its own or prior to eating, about 15 or 20 minutes or so, because they digest quickly. Fruits digest quickly, so if you're eating it at the end of the meal, it's stuck on top of all of the foods are getting digested, and since it's digested first, it starts sitting there and starts fermenting, and it turns into acid, so then you get the acid reflux and the stomach upset. So I stopped eating my fruits at the end of the meal and eat them before. I never have the pain. So it's like, so sometimes you have to evaluate yourself. Sometimes it could be a medical issue that needs attention. Sometimes it's just the way you need to eat the foods, how you intake them and when.
I think the intake is extremely important. We were always taught not to waste. Whatever was on your plate, you finished. As long as you portioned it correctly. In numerous faith traditions, it's stated that your stomach is split into thirds. 1/3 for food, 1/3 for water, and 1/3 for air, essentially digestion. And I think that's a very unique model to look at. I think we all agree that we cannot stand when individuals will come to us and say, I'm obese because my mother was obese and my grandfather was obese, and as you stated, I have diabetes because there's a lineage of diabetes that just drives me up the freaking wall. Because you can make a change. You can make a change. Oftentimes when we take a look at people's models, they just fall into what was normal to them for generations and generations and generations. So they consume, to the point where you should never fall into a food coma. This is very dangerous. What's actually very unique in certain cultural manifestations is it's a cultural norm that, at least in my culture, that if I go to somebody's house and food is placed in front of me, I better eat that. If another plate is placed in front of me, I better eat that. And I better keep eating till they stop bringing me. But the problem is, if I don't stop eating, they think that they should keep bringing me. So it's like a pretty weird diaspora of situation we have here. But people consume to the point where they're passed out. Food is supposed to give you energy. Food is not supposed to put you to sleep. And I think when we take a look at the various, at least culturally speaking, the various GI issues within my community, or the communities that I do serve, it's because of our own doing, essentially. It'll be, we don't know what fruit is. We know what baklava is. So we'll eat meat, about 2 pieces of salad, and then eat something extremely fatty on top of that. So I think these are things that we should recognize and attempt to change.
I just wanted to note, my son he's a young adult, and I cook healthfully at home, or try to do my best. But I noticed among his friends, they don't eat healthfully. And I've gotten this with conversing with people. They're busy. It's hard to take time to cook healthfully. But in eating out, people have this idea that if they're eating out, they can just eat whatever they want. Because it's almost like, not an extravagance, but a little getaway from the kitchen or whatever the idea might be about that. But in doing that, they allow themselves extras that they would eat otherwise than if they were to eat at home. And if people are eating out often and have that mentality, well, I'm eating out, you can change that mentality. I had a niece just last week talking that when she when she's in one mode of activity, she's healthfully. But boy, when she's in that other mode, she's eating out and going fast food and whatnot. And it's like, I'm out, I have to eat. So it's like, yeah, but just because you're out doesn't mean you have to eat a poor way. You can still make selections of the menu that's healthful. So I think the thing is that when you are anywhere, in your home or out with people at an event, don't make every outing, every event, every celebration an excuse to not have to worry about what you're eating healthfully. Because all those excuses build up and accumulate until a point where we're not taking care of ourselves in a dietary way. So you really need to incorporate a lifestyle that no matter where you are, for whatever purpose, celebration, event, you need to always be aware of what your body needs and only select foods that you know are of well-being for yourself. And I think if you look at a selection, especially people go haywire at a buffet. I don't care for buffets. I don't eat that much. But in that, when you go down the buffet line, just because it's there, people have to start thinking, like, again, food on the plate, but like at a buffet line, people just put as much as they can on that plate because it's like, I paid so much, and it's like, this is $20. I can eat whatever I want. So they gorge themselves, and again, it's like excess. You don't need to gorge yourself to be taking care of yourself. You're taking care of yourself should be first. So no matter what realm you find yourself in, because we only have one body to carry us through our lifetime, and we want it to be as healthful and long-lasting in a healthful way so we can enjoy life.
Excellent answers, you guys. I agree with all these methods of assessment. I do the same in my practice. I do a lot of testing, genetic testing, blood stool analysis to give some raw data, but nothing like experience. I want to end on a light, optimistic note, and I'm going to ask each one of you guys. We have unearthed and cast some much needed spotlight on some problems, but I want to try to end with a sense of optimism, and I'd like to get a closing comment from each one of you guys about what things look good, about what things look bright in our future now and in the near future, where food's going because of collective consciousness just like this.
Well, I think it's a really good question, and I love the fact that, really, quite frankly, in healthcare and in health and in the food nation, we need a big change. We definitely, I think we have lots of changes in other places, and food is one of the last right now. But that we are seeing change happen because people are demanding it, people are wanting it. You guys going and making choices in the grocery store of things that are healthier, and we become more one at a time. Dan and I talk about in our field teaching people about chiropractic and nervous system one spine at a time. Every time you teach another person, then somebody else is another one going to the grocery store buying the right things. That we're actually right now starting to see these things changing. Myers is carrying organic food. Right? Who would ever have thought that was going to be something that was happening out of Myers? And so, we are seeing more and more of a demand because people are getting educated. More people are learning about the right food choices. People are asking questions at restaurants about whether or not there's preservatives or toxins in that food, and being a little bit, as I call myself, a foodie, because I'm a little kind of a food snob, if you will. I'm kind of picky when I go to restaurants, and I think there's more of that happening. And then I'm delighted to see not only the supply being, available, but that now we're asking questions in the restaurant. We don't have to go get 6 other people who are back in the kitchen to try to figure out what we're talking about, because now we have waitresses that actually know the answers to our questions. And so I think it's a gradual change. I think change is going to come from the people up, because we aren't going to see change happening from these higher decisions telling all of us what to do, but we're going to be telling them what we want. So we should just stick to it and keep going.
Very much so. The change is ongoing. I think what might have happened with industrialization at the, the 1900s and all that, everything was new. Like, we can process this. Like, this is a new way of doing this. And I think it went to an extreme, and now it's going back. So everything has its own cycle, and now, thankfully, it's going to the part where we're getting back to the wholesome foods. We've realized, medically, or whatever the case might be, or mentally, that things need to change. The food industry went too far, and things have to revert back to their natural conditions. So I think that's a good thing, especially I'm a vegetarian of about 36 years, and it's very nice to see all the vegetarian offerings at different places, because I remember going to like Tubby Submarine and ordering an Italian sub and hold all the meat, and I'd get like, what? Or going to Frankenmuth and ordering the chicken dinner. It's like, but no chicken. So like, it's nice to see over the couple of decades that have gone by that now there are those opportunities to make those choices, because the word is being out that people want better food. And that's what it comes down to. Whole food, better food, foods that are meant to be eaten.
Over the past couple of years, I used to go to a lot of mosques, churches, synagogues, and temples, and they all gave me 647,938 ways I'm going to hell. And I'm like, wow, this is a scary place. But now the conversations in these faith-based institutions have actually changed into a place of not teaching me where I'm going to hell in the different ways, but how to improve my life. Not in terms of spiritually, but in terms of the food that I consume, how I consume it, why I consume it. Within healthcare models across the nation, there's actually now a focus on the social determinants of health. And I think this is actually very instrumental towards our fight, towards improving the quality of life for myself and yourselves. I would have never have thought that systems would have based their models on my health, rather than profiting from my insurance. There used to be a time, and to some extent we are still in that time, where pharmaceuticals ran the healthcare industry. But I can show you positive models in healthcare where they rather write prescriptions for the food insecurity rather than write the prescription for a medication for your diabetes. I think this is crucial. I can drug you up all day, but if I'm not giving you the ability to improve what you consume, am I making a difference? Am I making a change? What I'm actually doing is just trying to balance out your life till the inevitable comes. But instead of writing prescriptions, we can now attempt to write prescriptions for food, to access to gyms. I think this is unique. The conversation has started at almost every level, within governments, within faith-based institutions, and specifically, I think most importantly, within schools. Since we're in an elementary school, or a formal elementary school, I remember what kids used to eat in hot lunches. I'm hoping that improves. I don't know what they eat now, but I remember really old chicken nuggets with a processed food cut, and chocolate milk, which is 2%, which is essentially healthy, correct? But I think engaging these institutions, making that change at their level, I think is very crucial, and that's actually very positive. By fulfilling the obligations we set forth, we'll improve their lives, and that actually is very motivating. Until the next issue comes up, then Lord help us.
I want to thank all three of our panelists. I want to thank you guys for being here. Just in this group right here, we share collective consciousness, and I believe that awareness and education, that's the beginning of change. I'm glad that everybody's here. I think all of us will be here. If you have any specific questions for any of us, please feel free to approach us. And thanks, and keep coming back. Thank you, guys.